I think what I really would like to say today is very much from the entrepreneurship perspective instead of, the urban or social perspective. So I'm just going to provide quite different angles about like how value means in terms of the city. So the first thing I want to talk about is that what everybody knows about the city. I think we actually has been talking and talking about this, and then and it's basically because of this guy. At the end of 1990s, the beginning of the year of 2000, and unfortunately, the majority of discussion about the city is still about whatever this guy is writing about, which I think is problematic. He talked about what? He talked about generic city. He talked about city without identity, city without culture, like all this kind of thing. We are still using all these kind of terms to describe, a very negative side about a global problem of urban developments. And I use this picture because it's at the end of the day a generic city, and it's actually being described as a generic city as a labeling. So I think my presentation today is really about like how we can actually revisit the whole city from the very grounded perspective. A few things that I want to point out very, very quickly. Number one, city is actually a migrant city. Number two, lots of infrastructure developments. The subways, 157 kilometer of subways built in like a few years, and all the money is from debts. A city of sprouting, like this is basically a very classic image that every scholar actually got their own kind of drawing. Like how the city actually developing from a fishing village to the cities like right now. The city is really about urban village. Everybody's talking about that. The distribution about this kind of informal city. City of creative industry. So this is actually a mapping that we did about all the creative part in the city. So actually that comes to my very first conclusion about the city. So what is the 5 pillars of this kind of rapid urbanizations? Number 1, migrants. Number 2, infrastructure. Number 3, sprouting. Informal urbanisms, creative industry. So my presentation today is about none of these things because we think this is all wrong. So what is actually about Shenzhen that people don't really know? And this is something that I want to really just having a lot of description about what's happening right now, and we can actually go in depth and basically you can talk about it. So this idea about migrants, I think is totally different from like maybe 3 years ago. So you can see like the education composition about migrants. And you can find out there are actually more and more people, they're actually very well educated. And this, and the city is actually also advocating people to stay. So it's no longer about like how we're actually dealing with a big group of migrants, but it's basically a problem of a big group of new citizens. And we talk about hardwares. I think there's actually a few people in the morning talking about Shenzhen is really lack of the software. And basically, this is actually a mapping of what is the stakeholder of a creative community. And there's actually a lot of different type of communities like that in Shenzhen. I think the problems that we have right now is not about there is no such software in the city. It's really about, it seems that we are lacking of a methodologies to really understanding what is the communities and how the community actually works, the software part of the city. This is actually a map showing all the regeneration projects. I think Wei Wen or Du Jian in the morning actually mentioned we don't have any land left. We are developing around like 90-something% of our overall developable lands. So for the next generation of urban development, it's really about urban regeneration. So I use the word like implosive booming. It's basically about like how the city going to not extending from the inside out, but from the outside in. We are not talking about urban village right now. I mean, this is very unfortunate. I totally understand. This is actually showing all the future urban village redevelopment project in the city. And we assume all these projects go through. So basically, we are facing a bunch of city inside the city. Like they are really high density cities because of all this kind of compensation, all this kind of very weird and strange political structure in the city. So we're actually dealing with a bunch of like a medium-sized city network instead of one mega city. The very last one, the idea of creativities. We actually talk that a lot. It's really because we're architects. We like to create, but right now I think the biggest mega trend about the city is about innovation. I think there's a very slight difference between creativity and innovation. And this is actually a mapping of all the maker space. If you don't understand what's maker, I think I can talk about that later. It's really about a bunch of people using very high-end fabrication technology to create their own products in the city. So basically, this is the new pillars. I try to really summarize it. New citizens. Creative communities is becoming our new source of power. Densification, we're not talking about getting bigger. Gigantism, we are talking about actually a revitalization of all this kind of European utopian idea about megastructure. And they actually got a big market there. It's pretty interesting. Innovations is a creation of this kind of new economy, and so on. So, what is this new industry and this kind of new power actually start to generate? This is actually a mapping of like different types. It's actually not very complete, but I think it's actually a matrix about like the ownership model and development history of this kind of social innovation projects that we are recognizing in the city. Like for example, like the UABB, the technology park, OCT Loft, and Huaqiangbei. I really want to focus on the Huaqiangbei case for this presentation, which is a bottom-up thing, which is a market-driven. There is no such a very, very strong governmental force behind it. And the starting point about this story is really because of these two news. The left-hand side is actually a Wall Street Journal published in 2009, like 5 years ago. It's basically like the writer actually make a big irony about this fake phone that they just Photoshop Obama be part of it and actually call himself BlackBerry instead of BlackBerry. But on the right-hand side, it's actually just a news like a few months ago from Economist. It's really talking about, the title called Hacking Shenzhen, why Southern China is the best place for world for hardware innovator to be. This is actually a huge transformation about this whole copycat or Shanzhai culture in Shenzhen and transforming into, the most creative and most open-end technology innovation source. So just showing you a map of Shenzhen, the yellow is the area before 1990s, and the red is the area after 1990. And I try to circle where the area I'm talking about, Huaqiangbei, is locating. Is in Luohu district, is quite close to the CBD. There is just some very general description about the site. It's actually a composition of a bunch of state-owned enterprise at the very beginning. And they got all this kind of a warehouse type of building. And it's a very mixed-use area with so many different types of programs. And the programs sometimes mismatch with, the architectural typology. And why this thing is so important, and why this thing is so, so influential until right now. This is 4 out of 2,000 fake iPhones that when iPhone actually launched the first day. And when iPhone 6 launched that same day, or even before iPhone 6 launched, there are actually like 200 fake iPhone 6. It's actually in the market. And every single one of this is making one tiny slight change. So for example, somebody think that iPhone is stupid because Chinese people use 2 SIM cards. So let's make an iPhone with 2 SIM cards. And somebody think, oh, iPhone is so stupid because it's so expensive. Let's make a very cheap one. Let's make a mini one. So this is actually becoming an open source hardware, like automatically. So whatever things get into the market, the distributed creativity start to mobilize all this kind of resource in this whole city and start to create something anti-capitalism. So what next? This is what people call Apple Peel. It's actually a case plus iPod, and automatically transform your iPod into iPhone 4 with only half price. And the functions, they actually got 2 SIM card slots. They got a battery that can last your phone for like a month. And you can see these credit card things. They actually got this kind of device that your phone can read Chinese credit cards. So it's so culturally and socially sensitive. It's something that Apple, as a generic product, can never develop for a specific culture. And at the end of the day, this website, I'm actually following up this company for the last few years, but I didn't check their website for last year, and they totally upgrade and to totally change. And right now, Apple is thinking about buying them out. What next? This is actually a accelerator, a technology accelerator called Accelerator. That thing is actually a very Tat name, It's a company, got a lot of funding from venture capitalists. They have their San Francisco company, and they have their Huaqiangbei branch. And the whole thing about this maker space is not just about DIY. It's about like how, say, Sony from San Francisco can actually use the fake electronics in Huaqiangbei to produce their 2,000 prototypes. So eventually, they share like some shares of this kind of new technology, and they're making 2 billion RMB a year right now. Another case, Seed Studio. They used to be in Huaqiangbei, and right now they moved to another maker hub called Liuxiandong. This is actually a map they actually make to map out Huaqiangbei. And Huaqiangbei is this fake electronic city, and nobody knows where to find what. So they're actually making a map, helping San Francisco people come to Shenzhen and shop. So eventually, people actually make a real term about it. It's called open source hardware. It's totally going to revolutionize the whole creation and innovation process in Silicon Valley, per se. So what do people actually do in this kind of a makerspace? This is actually one case. It's actually created by a bunch of failed architectural students. They didn't do pretty good in their school. And then they cannot get a job, and they don't like to work for some bad office. So they start up their own one. They make 3D print lamps, and they sell it in Amazon.com. And each of the lamps you see on the left-hand side, the right-hand side of the drawing, is selling $100. But nobody buying it because they're really bad about marketing. And they're actually struggling a lot about like how they want to really celebrate. But at the end of the day, they create their own 3D printer. Like all this kind of thing is so custom-made. Like they actually like smart enough to create their own thing. So what is all this really about? I really try to touch this concept of social innovation again. I think this diagram is a very quick and preliminary diagram, but I try to really say social innovation right now is actually the core of it. So this is this is like all the things that people are actually doing at this particular moment, but there's no really such synergy and no really a holistic integration about all this kind of thing between business developments, like really ad hoc things in China, technology R&D, and social research. And eventually you can see like how the combination of this, like for example, civic technology, is actually a new thing in the world that try to considering only 10% of the technology innovation as civic technology. It means that they're actually helping to create a civic society. Like social entrepreneurship is something new in China, and it's a totally chaotic situation right now. Smart city is a very cliche term, but right now, it's still politically appropriate, and it's actually one of 业绩 things for a lot of government leaders. But at the end of the day, so I mean, this is something that I try to really or boldly put in the middle of it as social innovation. So what is the core of all this? If we want to really escape from this kind of cliche kind of thing. Smart city is really not about optimizations of the city. It's really about how we can create a more holistic urban system that improve the quality of life by social innovation. So what's that? Oh, okay, new values and new valuation. I mean, I think the idea about value is really about valuation. It's not about a social value. It's really about like how eventually we can translate all this kind of what I prefer we call social activities, so social innovation into something tangible. So this is actually like a big map, or my map, that I actually try to create for this presentation. This is actually a map that I want to really represent the idea of new power. The transformation from the avant-garde design, like architects always like avant-garde, because we want to be the one really smart guy, change the world. But at the end of the day, we are talking about another concept, zeitgeist. I mean, it's a German. I think I pronounced it pretty badly. But its name's like a spirit of time. It actually really means like a bunch of people doing the same thing at the same time, and they don't know why, but they just do it. And I think there is actually a trend in global or in China or in Shenzhen to move from the upright corner to the left down corner, and all this kind of distributed creativity start to create a lot of value in terms of the accomplishments of the government on the one hand, and like real market value on the other hand. So eventually, I think I really want to come back to this. About the whole value of Shanzhai, like how this kind of migrants or new citizens, they repair cell phone for 5 years, and eventually they invent their new cell phone. This is really like a lot of story right now in the city, and how we can really value this instead of say, oh my God, these people are just copycats. Let's sue them. And another thing is really about the whole financial transformation. I mean, all the black one is actually what is available in China for actual capital to flow into the markets. And the gray one is something that people are developing. And basically you can see there is a lot of things that we have to do in China. Like we actually really depending on some very general financial tools right now in China to support this kind of social innovation, and at the end of the day, like how social innovation can meet with the market. I think this can be another big question that we can talk about. This is actually my last slide. It's about qualitative impacts and connotative impacts. I think we can also interpret this as accomplishment concept. Again. It's really about instead of looking at a bunch of numbers saying, oh, people actually, earning more money. They earn 20% more money from 20 years ago. It sounds pretty good, right? But instead, they actually work 100% more in their life. So instead of this kind of more quantitative impact, how can we really creating or go beyond the concept of KPI? Even though I use the term a KPI. Like how can we really go beyond KPI and start to measure the quality of life? And when we actually designing a city, what kind of more systematic or holistic system that we have to really deal with? Instead of just figuring out the very superficial problems, like, oh, people don't earn enough money, so let's give them some money. I mean, that is really not about solving any problems. It's really about understanding the holistic picture of the problem and actually really start with the system instead of starting with the phenomenon. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Ted, thank you. One short question, maybe two. This is not about new values, this is about new energy, I think. We've been talking, in my opinion, for a long time today about spatial facts and things, but this is really what you mentioned, the software. The question I have, listening to your story, how specific and unique is this for Shenzhen? Or is this happening on other locations in China as well?
You know, I think Shenzhen actually got a few very unique light of history. I mean, for example, it's actually pretty well connected to the whole PRD in terms of the world factory. I think this is actually really important for us to really understand the big topic about today is the factory of the world is actually, you know, being a big value of the city. So I think instead of really getting rid of that kind of identity, I think the city, or at least from the bottom up, or from the society, people are actually, you know, unconsciously looking for the value of such identity as part of the factory of the world. And I think the whole Shanzhai thing is really starting up with, you know, being like the factory of the world. And right now, they're still part of it. But instead of just manufacturing, they start to create. I think this can be like, you know, a very new emergence urban developments for the city.
Just one remark, getting back to your examples of this highly interesting Apple clones. What of course will be logical is actually that the company buys Apple and not Apple buys that company.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much,
No
Tat.
problem.
Yes.